My name is Sarah, and I'm 29 years old. As an elementary school teacher, I always dreamed of a simple, meaningful wedding. When I met Michael at a charity event 3 years ago, everything felt perfect. After his romantic proposal 8 months ago, I was on cloud 9. Wedding planning started wonderfully until my mother-in-law Patricia stepped in and took over. Nothing prepared me for the day she demanded I uninvite my own parents to make room for her socialite friends. Drop a comment, letting me know where you're watching from. If you've ever dealt with controlling in-laws, hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to hear how I handled this nightmare situation. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, raised by the most loving, hard-working parents anyone could ask for. My father Tom worked as a carpenter building beautiful custom furniture that people would commission from 3 counties over. My mother Linda was the town librarian who knew every child by name and always had the perfect book recommendation. They weren't wealthy by any means, but they provided a stable, warm home filled with laughter and support. My parents sacrificed a lot to put me through college. I remember my dad taking extra jobs on weekends and my mum selling her collection of vintage books to help pay for my education. When I graduated and secured my position as a 3rd grade teacher at Oakwood Elementary, they beamed with such pride you would have thought I'd won the Nobel Prize. That's the kind of parents they are. The type who find joy in my accomplishments and comfort me through disappointments. Michael, on the other hand, came from a completely different world. As the son of James Hamilton, CEO of Hamilton Investment Group, and Patricia Hamilton, a prominent socialite who chaired half the charity boards in Boston, Michael grew up with privileges I could barely comprehend. Private schools, summer homes, international vacations. His childhood photo albums looked like travel magazines. What made me fall in love with Michael was how none of that seemed to matter to him. Despite his privileged background, he was kind, compassionate, and remarkably grounded. As an architect with a passion for sustainable design, Michael used his family connections not for personal gain, but to advocate for affordable housing projects and community spaces. We met at a fundraiser for the Children's Hospital, where I volunteered reading to patients on weekends. Michael's firm had donated design services for the hospital's new wing. I was arranging a display of the children's artwork when I knocked over a vase of flowers, soaking both myself and Michael, who happened to be standing nearby. Instead of being annoyed, he laughed, helped me clean up, and then wore his water-stained suit proudly for the rest of the evening. Battle scars from a noble cause, he called the stains when his colleagues asked what happened. We exchanged numbers that night, and our first date was at the Botanical Garden. We walked for hours talking about everything from our favourite childhood books to our dreams for the future. With Michael, conversation was effortless. He listened to my stories about my students with genuine interest and shared his passion for creating spaces that could transform communities. As our relationship progressed, I was introduced to the Hamilton family. James, Michael's father, surprised me with his warmth. Despite his powerful position, he was down to earth and welcoming, asking thoughtful questions about my teaching career and sharing stories from his own days as a public school student before his financial success. Patricia, however, was another story entirely. From our first meeting, she assessed me like I was an item at an auction of questionable provenance. Her smile never reached her eyes, and her compliments always contained subtle barbs. "Teaching is such a noble profession," she would say. "It must be so rewarding to sacrifice financial stability for the greater good." Or, "That dress is so practical. I appreciate a woman who doesn't feel the need to keep up with fashion." Michael would gently defend me, saying things like, "Mom, Sarah's school just won a state award for academic excellence." Or, "Actually, Sarah has great style. She just knows quality doesn't always mean designer labels." But he never directly confronted her condescension. At the time, I attributed his behavior to a desire to keep the peace, and I appreciated that he at least tried to counter her subtle jabs. There were other warning signs I chose to ignore, the way Patricia would forget to include me in family photos, how she would speak about Michael's ex-girlfriend Catherine, daughter of a state senator, with wistful nostalgia, the pointed questions about my modest background. But I was so in love with Michael that I convinced myself these issues would resolve with time, that Patricia would eventually see I made her son happy, and that would be enough. Looking back, I should have recognized that Michael had a pattern of appeasing his mother rather than standing firm. When Patricia insisted we attend her charity gala instead of my best friend's birthday party, Michael suggested we compromise by making a brief appearance at the birthday before spending the rest of the evening at the gala. When she criticized my apartment as quaint and pressured us to move to a luxury building where her friends lived, Michael started casually sending me listings for condos in that neighborhood. But love has a way of blurring red flags into simple challenges to overcome, and I truly believed that what Michael and I shared was strong enough to weather any storm, even one named Patricia Hamilton. Michael proposed on our second anniversary at the same botanical garden where we had our first date. He had arranged for the staff to open the butterfly conservatory after hours, and as hundreds of colourful wings fluttered around us, he got down on one knee. The ring was perfect, not ostentatiously large as I might have expected from someone of his background, but a vintage emerald surrounded by small diamonds that had belonged to his grandmother. She was the strongest woman I knew, he said as he slipped it on my finger. Independent, kind, and unimpressed by wealth or status. She would have adored you, Sarah. I was so happy I could barely speak, just nodding through tears as he slid the ring onto my finger. We spent the evening calling our loved ones to share the news. My parents cried with joy, immediately insisting we come for dinner that weekend to celebrate. My dad joked about finally having someone to help him build the treehouse he'd promised my nephew, while my mum started planning what family recipes to pass down. When we called Michael's parents, James congratulated us warmly, saying he'd been hoping for this announcement and was thrilled to welcome me to the family. Patricia's reaction was more measured. "Well, this is certainly news," she said, her voice betraying neither enthusiasm nor disapproval. "We'll have to begin planning the engagement party right away. The club has an opening in 3 weeks. I'll book it tomorrow." Before I could even suggest that we might want something more intimate, or include my input in the planning, Patricia had steamrolled ahead, listing off caterers and florists she would contact. Michael squeezed my hand apologetically, but didn't interrupt his mother's monologue about suitable announcements for the Boston Globe Society page. The engagement party became my first real taste of what was to come. Patricia hosted it at the Westfield Country Club, an exclusive venue with a 10-year waiting list that somehow had availability exactly when she wanted it. When I submitted my guest list of close friends and family members, about 30 people in total, Patricia informed me that unfortunately the venue has limited capacity and trimmed my list down to 10, while her own list of business associates and social connections numbered well over 100. The event itself was beautiful, but felt more like a networking opportunity for the Hamiltons than a celebration of our engagement. My parents, dressed in their Sunday best, looked uncomfortable among the designer gowns and custom tuxedos. My friends were seated at a table in the far corner of the room, while Michael and I were paraded from group to group, meeting patrician-looking strangers who seemed to know everything about Michael's career trajectory, but nothing about me beyond my charming profession as a teacher. Despite this rocky start, Michael and I initially had clear ideas about our wedding. We wanted something intimate and meaningful, about 100 guests at a rustic vineyard, about an hour outside the city. We envisioned farm-to-table catering, wildflower centerpieces, and dancing under string lights as the sun set. Most importantly, we wanted a celebration that reflected both of our backgrounds and values. My parents were incredibly supportive of our vision. They had set aside money for my wedding since I was born. Not a fortune, but $15,000 that represented years of careful saving. "We want to contribute," my father said earnestly. "We know it's not what the Hamiltons are used to, but it's important to us to help give you the day you deserve." When Patricia heard about my parents' contribution, she smiled thinly. "That's very sweet of Tom and Linda, but really unnecessary. James and I will cover all the expenses. It's tradition for the bride's family to pay, but in this case, we're happy to take that burden off their shoulders." The word burden hung in the air, loaded with implication. Before I could respond, Michael jumped in. "We appreciate both families wanting to help. Maybe my parents can handle the venue and catering, and Sarah's parents can cover the flowers and photography." It was a diplomatic suggestion, but it set a precedent. Patricia would control the most significant aspects of the wedding, while my parents would get symbolic input at best. From there, things spiraled quickly. Patricia vetoed the vineyard as too rustic and booked the Grand Hamilton Hotel instead, a place so ornate and formal it looked like a European palace. Our guest list of 100 ballooned to 250, with Patricia adding names of people neither Michael nor I had ever met. "They're important connections for your father," she explained when I questioned the additions. "And for Michael's future. Networking doesn't stop for weddings, Sarah." The farm-to-table catering was replaced with a formal 5-course menu featuring imported delicacies and French cuisine that I could barely pronounce. My idea for a bluegrass band was dismissed as provincial, and instead, Patricia hired a classical quartet for the ceremony and a 12-piece orchestra for the reception. Even my choice of a simple, elegant gown was questioned, with Patricia arranging appointments at exclusive bridal salons and pushing me toward heavily beaded, elaborate designs befitting the venue. Tessin. Michael tried to mediate these conflicts, suggesting compromises that inevitably tilted in his mother's favor. The hotel does have that garden terrace, he offered when I mourned the loss of our outdoor venue, and maybe we can incorporate wildflowers in the bridesmaids' bouquets. When I expressed concern about the growing guest list, he assured me that most of Mom's business contacts will just make an appearance and leave early. I found myself increasingly sidelined in the planning of my own wedding, feeling more like a prop than a bride. But I tried to focus on what mattered: that at the end of this elaborate production, Michael and I would be married. I told myself that one day of compromise was worth a lifetime with the man I loved. I convinced myself that Patricia's controlling behavior came from excitement rather than a desire to remake the wedding in her image. I was wrong. 2 months before our wedding date, Patricia showed up unannounced at my apartment on a Saturday morning. I was still in my pajamas grading papers at my kitchen table when her distinctive knock, 3 sharp raps, startled me. "I hope this isn't a bad time," she said, though her tone made it clear my convenience was irrelevant. "We have some urgent wedding business to discuss." She was immaculately dressed in a cream Chanel suit, her blonde hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless despite the early hour. She surveyed my small apartment with the same barely concealed distaste she always showed, setting her designer handbag on my coffee table, as if worried it might pick up contaminants from any other surface. "I've been reviewing the final guest list," she said, pulling out an embossed folder, "and I've had to make some adjustments." I poured coffee for us both, trying to maintain a positive attitude. "What kind of adjustments?" Patricia slid a printed sheet across the table. "Here's the revised list." As I scanned the names, my stomach dropped. There were at least 50 people I didn't recognize. Names like Dr. and Mrs. Whitfield Cabot and the Honourable Judge Philip Beaumont and guest. But what truly shocked me was what was missing. My parents' names had been removed from the list entirely, along with my aunts, uncles, and several close friends. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice tight. "My family isn't on this list." Patricia took a delicate sip of coffee. "It's not a mistake, Sarah. I've had to make some difficult decisions based on the final count from the hotel. The Baxters are major clients of James's firm, the Livingstons serve on 3 boards with me, and the Cabots are essential to Michael's career advancement. I simply couldn't justify keeping people who, well, let's be honest, won't be comfortable in this setting." I stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. "You're saying my parents shouldn't come to my wedding?" "Not the reception," Patricia clarified, as if this made it better. "They can attend the ceremony, of course, but the reception is going to be quite sophisticated with a 7-course French menu and formal dancing. Your parents would feel out of place. I'm doing them a kindness, really." The casual cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. "My parents contributed financially to this wedding," I reminded her, struggling to keep my voice steady. "They've been looking forward to this day since I was born." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "James has already arranged to return their deposit. Quite generous, actually, since most of it was already spent on deposits." She leaned forward, her voice taking on a confidential tone. "Sarah, I know this seems harsh, but I'm trying to protect everyone involved. Your parents in their department store attire, seated next to the mayor, the conversation alone would be excruciating for them. And what would they discuss with our friends' local library funding?" My hands were shaking so badly I had to set down my coffee cup. "This is unacceptable. I'm not uninviting my family to my wedding." Patricia's expression hardened. "I was afraid you might be difficult about this. Let me be clear, James and I are paying over $100,000 for this event. If you insist on turning it into some kind of folksy reunion, we will be forced to withdraw our support entirely. You're threatening to cancel our wedding if I don't exclude my own parents." I was stunned by her audacity. "I'm simply pointing out that choices have consequences," Patricia replied coolly. "Michael understands how these social obligations work. I suggest you discuss it with him before making any rash decisions." After she left, I called Michael in tears, explaining what had happened. His response left me even more devastated. "My mum called me already," he said, sounding conflicted. "Look, I know it's not ideal, but maybe we can find a middle ground. What if we have a small family dinner the night before with your parents, and then they just come to the ceremony?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Michael, She wants to exclude my parents from our wedding reception to make room for people we don't even know. How can you even consider that acceptable? You don't understand the pressure she's under, Michael said defensively. Dad's business has some big mergers happening and these connections are important. Mum is just trying to make sure everything goes perfectly. Perfectly for whom? I demanded. Because it sounds like she's planning her event, not our wedding. We argued for nearly an hour with Michael continually seeking a compromise that would essentially give his mother exactly what she wanted while throwing my family a token consolation prize. By the end of the call, I felt completely alone, realizing that Michael wouldn't stand up to Patricia even on something this fundamental. The final blow came a week later when my parents received a sample invitation that listed only the ceremony details, not the reception. My mother called me, her voice careful and measured. "Sarah, honey, is there something you want to tell us about the reception plans?" The hurt in her voice broke my heart. I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth, that they had been deemed too unsophisticated for Patricia's grand social event. Instead, I promised to sort out the mistake and rushed to hang up before I started crying. As the wedding date approached, I felt increasingly trapped. I loved Michael, but I was beginning to wonder if that love was enough to sustain a lifetime of being marginalized by his mother with only his lukewarm defense to shield me. The wedding had transformed from a joyful celebration into a source of anxiety and resentment. And still, I tried to convince myself that things would improve after we were married, that Patricia would loosen her grip once the wedding was over. I was wrong about that too. The rehearsal dinner was held at Le Ciel, an exclusive French restaurant with 3 Michelin stars and a 6-month waiting list. Patricia had reserved the entire mezzanine level, which featured crystal chandeliers, hand-painted murals, and panoramic views of the city. The tables were adorned with elaborate floral arrangements in white and gold, with personalized place cards in elegant calligraphy. My parents arrived looking their absolute best. My father in a new suit he'd bought specially for the weekend, my mother in a blue dress she'd spent weeks searching for. They were clearly trying to fit in, and my heart ached at their effort. Despite Patricia's machinations, I had insisted they attend both the rehearsal dinner and the reception, threatening to call off the wedding entirely if Michael didn't back me up. He had reluctantly agreed, but the victory felt hollow as I watched Patricia greet my parents with air kisses and then promptly seat them at the furthest table from the main family group, wedged between Michael's ancient great-aunt, who was hard of hearing, and a business associate of James, who spent the entire evening on his phone. Meanwhile, Patricia had placed herself next to Michael at the centre table, with me relegated to her other side, where she could effectively control the conversation. Throughout dinner, she regaled the table with stories of Michael's childhood accomplishments, exclusive schools and impressive connections, painting a picture of his life that deliberately excluded me. When it came time for toasts, Patricia stood and tapped her crystal glass. "As the mother of the groom," she began, "I've had the privilege of watching Michael grow from an exceptional boy into an extraordinary man. From his early days at Pemberton Academy, where he was youngest student body president, to Princeton, where he graduated summa cum laude, to his remarkable career achievements, Michael has always exemplified the Hamilton family values of excellence, ambition, and discernment." She paused, glancing at me briefly before continuing. "While his father and I might have imagined a different path for his personal life, perhaps with Catherine Beaumont, who just made partner at her father's law firm, we trust Michael's judgment." Uncomfortable laughter rippled through the room as she added, "Besides, as I always say, it's good for talented men to marry simple women, keeps them grounded." I felt my face burning as several of Patricia's friends tittered. Across the room, I saw my father's expression of humiliation, my mother squeezing his hand under the table. When I looked at Michael, hoping to see outrage on my behalf, he was staring at his plate, a tight smile on his lips. After the main course, I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment alone. In the ornate powder room, I stared at my reflection in the gilded mirror. What was I doing? Was I really going to bind myself forever to a family where I would always be considered second class? To a man who wouldn't defend me against his mother's cruelty? What kind of partnership would that be? As I dabbed at my eyes with a monogrammed hand towel, I had a moment of absolute clarity. I couldn't do this. Not just the wedding, the marriage. I couldn't spend my life being undermined and belittled watching my husband choose his mother's approval over my dignity. I returned to the table with a strange sense of calm, knowing what I had to do. I asked Michael if we could speak privately, and we stepped out into a small anteroom off the main dining area. "I can't marry you tomorrow," I said simply. Michael's eyes widened. What Sarah is this about my mom's toast? She was just trying to be funny. You know how she is. That's exactly the problem, I replied. I do know how she is, and I know how you are with her. You won't stand up for me, Michael. Not about the guest list, not about her jokes, not about anything that really matters. That's not fair, he protested. I've been caught in the middle trying to make everyone happy. Can't you endure one day of this so we can start our life together? His words crystallized everything for me. If you won't stand up for me now, you never will. Marriage won't suddenly give you the courage to set boundaries with your mother. And I can't spend my life being the person everyone tolerates, but no one respects. You're overreacting, Michael insisted, his voice rising. Let's talk about this tomorrow after you've had time to calm down. There's nothing to talk about, I said, surprising myself with my conviction. The wedding is off. I walked back into the dining room past the startled faces of the guests who had clearly overheard parts of our conversation. I went straight to my parents, whispering that we needed to leave. As we stood to go, Patricia approached, her social mask firmly in place. Cold feet is so common, she announced loudly to the room. She'll be fine tomorrow after a good night's sleep. These emotional types just need a little drama before the big day. I didn't respond to her, focusing instead on gathering my things and helping my confused parents toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear Patricia smoothly directing the waiters to serve dessert, attempting to gloss over the disruption I had caused to her perfect event. In the taxi back to my apartment, I finally broke down sobbing in my mother's arms while my father patted my back awkwardly. I called my best friend Rachel as soon as we arrived home, and she came over immediately, bringing ice cream and tissues. I spent the night alternating between certainty that I'd made the right decision and panic that I was throwing away my chance at happiness with the man I loved. By morning, though, I knew exactly what I had to do. I woke early after a restless night, my mind surprisingly clear. The venue, the Grand Hamilton Hotel, had been booked from 9 a.m. for wedding preparations, with the ceremony scheduled for 2 p.m. It was currently 7:30 a.m. First, I called my parents, who were staying at a modest hotel a few blocks from the wedding venue. They answered immediately, clearly having been awake and worried. I'm not going through with the wedding as Patricia planned it, I told them firmly. But I haven't entirely given up on Michael. My mother's voice was gentle but concerned. Honey, are you sure about this? Last night seemed pretty final. I'm going to give him one last chance to prove that our relationship matters more than his mother's approval, I explained. But whatever happens, I need to know you support me. Always, my father said without hesitation. Whatever you decide, we're behind you 100%. Next, I called the wedding planner, Vivian, who had been professional but clearly took most of her direction from Patricia. There's been a change of plans, I informed her. I'll be at the hotel by 8:30 to discuss the details. Mrs. Hamilton is already here, Vivian said nervously. She's overseeing the floral installations. Perfect, I replied. I'll see you both soon. I dressed carefully in jeans and a simple white blouse. Not my planned pre-wedding outfit, but comfortable and confident. I took an Uber to the Grand Hamilton Hotel, rehearsing what I would say during the ride. As predicted, Patricia was in the ballroom directing staff with military precision. She was already dressed in her mother-of-the-groom outfit, a pale blue suit that probably cost more than my car. She looked surprised to see me, especially in such casual clothes. Sarah, what are you doing here so early, and why aren't you at the salon? The hair and makeup team is waiting for you there. Her tone was sharp with disapproval. We need to talk, I said calmly. There are going to be some changes to today's plans. Patricia's perfectly penciled eyebrows rose. The time for changes was months ago, dear. Everything is set now. She turned to instruct a waiter about champagne placement, dismissing me. I stepped directly into her line of sight. Either we discuss this privately, or I'm happy to have this conversation in front of the staff. Your choice. Something in my tone must have registered because Patricia nodded curtly and led me to a small conference room adjacent to the ballroom. What is this about? She demanded once we were alone. If this is still about your parents, I've already told you my position. No, Patricia, now I'm telling you mine. I took a deep breath. The wedding will proceed today, but not the way you've planned it. My parents will be seated in the front row as the parents of the bride. They will be at the family table for the reception. The seating chart will be reorganized to balance guests from both families, and you will treat my parents and friends with respect. Patricia stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. That's not possible. The arrangements are already finalized, and frankly, you're in no position to make demands. I'm in exactly the position to make demands. I'm the bride. And either this wedding happens on my terms, or it doesn't happen at all. Patricia's laugh was brittle. Don't be ridiculous. You won't call off the wedding. You love Michael too much, and where would that leave you, back in your tiny apartment teaching finger painting to children? Michael needs a wife who understands his world and the obligations that come with it. You're right that I love Michael, I acknowledged. But I love myself too, and I won't start our marriage by allowing you to humiliate me and my family. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling Michael now. He has a choice to make. Stand with me and have a wedding that respects both our families, or stand with you and have no wedding at all. Patricia's confidence wavered slightly. You're bluffing. Without breaking eye contact, I dialed Michael's number and put the phone on speaker. He answered on the second ring, sounding exhausted. Sarah, are you okay? I've been up all night worried about you. Michael, I'm at the hotel with your mother. I need you to come here right away. We have an important decision to make. What's going on? He asked, confusion evident in his voice. Just come, I said firmly. Now please. After I hung up, Patricia and I waited in tense silence. When Michael arrived 20 minutes later, he looked between us anxiously, clearly sensing the showdown that was brewing. What's happening, what? He asked. I took a deep breath. I'm giving us one last chance, Michael. I love you and I want to marry you. But not like this. Not with a wedding where my parents are treated like embarrassing relations to be hidden away. Not with your mother controlling every aspect of our lives. I reached into my purse and pulled out Patricia's check for the wedding expenses. I'm returning this. From now on, we pay our own way. That means we make our own decisions. Michael looked stunned. Sarah, where did you get that check? Your father gave me a copy when I expressed concerns about the wedding planning, I explained. He said I might need it someday. Patricia's face flushed with anger. James had no right to do that behind my back. I continued focusing on Michael. Here's my proposal. We scale back this extravagant event to something that actually represents us. We keep the ceremony in the garden as planned, but we cut the guest list to people who actually care about us. We make sure both our families are equally represented and equally respected. And we start our marriage as equal partners, not as an extension of the Hamilton family enterprise. Michael looked torn, glancing between his mother and me. Mum has put so much work into this. This isn't about the work she's put in, I said gently. It's about the marriage we're building. Are we starting it on a foundation of respect for both our families? Or are we establishing that her wishes will always come first? Patricia interjected. Michael, be reasonable. We have over 200 guests arriving, many of them important connections for your career. You can't possibly alienate all these people because Sarah is having last-minute jitters. My parents arrived then, having received my text asking them to come early. They entered the conference room cautiously, my mother's face tight with concern, my father looking uncomfortable in his new suit. Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, Patricia acknowledged them coolly. I'm afraid Sarah is having second thoughts about the arrangements. My father surprised everyone by speaking up. Actually, we heard about your arrangements, uninviting us from our own daughter's wedding reception. In my day, we called that shameful behaviour. Dad? I said softly, touched by his defence, but not wanting to escalate tensions. Michael looked stricken. Mum, did you really try to uninvite Sarah's parents? Before Patricia could respond with whatever spin she had prepared, the door opened again and James Hamilton entered. He looked distinguished as always, in a perfectly tailored suit, but his expression was unusually stern. I received your message, Sarah, he said, nodding to me, before turning to his wife. Patricia, what the hell have you done now? Patricia's composure slipped momentarily. James, I was simply trying to accommodate the Baxters and the Livingstons. You know how important they are to the Henderson merger. James shook his head in disgust. The Henderson merger. That's your excuse for trying to exclude the bride's parents from their own daughter's wedding. Have you completely lost your sense of decency? The room fell silent. I had never heard James speak to Patricia in anything but indulgent tones before. James turned to my parents. Tom, Linda, I want to apologise personally for my wife's behaviour. It's inexcusable and I'm deeply embarrassed. He then looked at Michael. Son, I've never interfered in your relationship with your mother before, but I'm telling you now, if you don't stand up for Sarah today, you don't deserve to marry her. Michael's face went through a series of emotions, shock, conflict, and finally resolution. He walked over to stand beside me, taking my hand. Mum, I love you, but Dad's right. What you did was wrong. Sarah is going to be my wife, and her family is my family now. If you can't accept that, then... He swallowed hard. Then you don't have to attend the wedding at all. Patricia gasped. You can't be serious. After everything I've done to make this day perfect. Perfect for whom? Michael asked, echoing my earlier question. This day isn't about your social connections or Dad's business deals. It's about Sarah and me committing to build a life together. I squeezed Michael's hand, overwhelmed by his unexpected backbone. So what's your decision? I asked him. My way with a smaller, more authentic celebration, or no wedding at all. Michael looked down at me, his eyes clearer and more certain than I'd seen in months. Your way, our way, a real wedding, not a networking event. Patricia made one last attempt. If you do this, I'll withdraw all financial support. For the wedding, for that house down payment, we discussed for everything. We don't need your money, Michael said firmly. We need your respect. And if you can't give that, then we'll proceed without it. Patricia looked around the room, seemingly shocked to find herself outnumbered. Even James had moved to stand with us, physically representing where his support lay. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and stormed out the door, slamming behind her. In the silence that followed, I turned to Vivian, the wedding planner, who had been standing frozen in the corner throughout the confrontation. We have some adjustments to make to today's plans. Can you help us? She nodded, looking somewhat shell-shocked but professional. Of course. What did you have in mind? And just like that, we began reimagining our wedding day. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Michael and I quickly drafted a new, smaller guest list that included the people who truly mattered to us. My family and friends, Michael's college roommates and work colleagues, neighbours and mentors who had supported our relationship. We sent out emergency texts explaining the change of venue from the formal ballroom to the hotel's garden terrace, which fortunately was already set up for the ceremony. My friends rallied around me, helping to call vendors and reorganize details. Rachel, my best friend, took charge of redirecting the florist to create simpler arrangements with wildflowers, as I had originally wanted. My former college roommate Lisa, who worked in event planning, coordinated with the hotel kitchen to modify the elaborate French menu to a more approachable selection of Michael's and my favorite foods. Michael was a revelation. Freed from his mother's influence, he threw himself into creating the wedding we had initially envisioned. He called in favors from architect friends to help transform the garden with additional string lights and lanterns. He personally rearranged the seating chart, ensuring my parents were given places of honor. My mother stepped in to help coordinate the last-minute changes, working alongside James with surprising ease. Your father-in-law is actually quite down to earth, she whispered to me at one point. He told me he grew up in a small town, not unlike ours. Who knew? James proved to be an unexpected ally, using his influence with the hotel management to facilitate our changes without additional charges. He even called several of the business associates Patricia had invited to politely uninvite them, explaining there had been a change of plans to a more intimate family celebration. The ceremony set up in the garden was coming together beautifully. Instead of the ostentatious floral arches Patricia had ordered, we had simple arrangements of seasonal flowers. The ornate chairs with their fussy satin covers were replaced with natural wooden ones. The classical quartet remained, but we adjusted their playlist to include some of the contemporary songs Michael and I loved. As the afternoon progressed, there was no sign of Patricia. I was simultaneously relieved and sad for Michael's sake. Despite everything, I knew her absence would hurt him. With just an hour before guests were due to arrive, I was in one of the hotel suites with Rachel getting ready. I had abandoned the elaborate ball gown Patricia had pressured me into buying and was wearing my original choice, a simple, elegant sheath dress with delicate lace detailing. My hair was styled in loose waves rather than the severe updo Patricia's stylist had planned. There was a soft knock at the door. Rachel opened it cautiously, then stepped back in surprise. "It's your mother-in-law," she whispered to me. Patricia entered hesitantly, looking uncharacteristically subdued. Her perfect composure had slipped. Her eyes were slightly red, her lipstick not quite as precisely applied as usual. "May I speak with Sarah alone?" she asked Rachel, her voice lacking its usual imperious tone. After I nodded, Rachel slipped out, giving Patricia a warning look that made me smile despite my nervousness. Patricia remained standing awkwardly just inside the door. "The garden looks lovely," she said finally. Much more personal than what I had planned. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I simply said, "Thank you for coming to see me." She took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology, Sarah. A sincere one, not the kind I usually offer when social protocol demands it. She moved further into the room but didn't sit down. I've been difficult about this wedding. About you and Michael really from the beginning. I waited, sensing she had more to say. When Michael first introduced you, I saw someone who could take my son away from the world I had carefully constructed for him. Someone who didn't understand or value the connections and traditions I thought were essential. She looked down at her hands. I convinced myself I was protecting him, protecting our family name. But really, I was just afraid of losing control. Her honesty surprised me. Patricia, I never wanted to take Michael away from his family. I just wanted to be accepted as part of it. I know that now. She met my eyes directly. James and I had a long talk after I left this morning. He made me see how my behaviour has been pushing Michael away, not keeping him close. And he helped me understand something else. That the very qualities I saw as threatening in you, your independence and strength of character, are exactly what Michael needs in a partner. She moved closer, her expression softening. I watched you today standing up for yourself and your family, refusing to be intimidated by me. And I realized you're exactly the kind of woman I would have wanted for my son if I hadn't been so blinded by my own prejudices. I didn't know what to say. This vulnerability from the always controlled Patricia was unexpected and disarming. I don't expect immediate forgiveness, she continued. I know I've hurt you and your family deeply, but if you're willing, I'd like to be part of your wedding day. Not as the organizer or controller, but simply as Michael's mother celebrating his happiness. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. I'd like that, I said softly, and I think it would mean the world to Michael. Patricia nodded, visibly relieved. I also want you to know that I've spoken to your parents. It was humbling to say the least. Your father was remarkably gracious considering how I've treated them. She turned to leave, then paused. You look beautiful, by the way. That dress suits you perfectly. Much better than the monstrosity I pushed you into buying. I laughed, surprised by her unexpected moment of humour. Thank you, Patricia. Eleanor, she corrected. My friends call me Eleanor. With a slight smile, she added, I hope someday you might count yourself among them. As she left, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The day was unfolding in ways I never could have anticipated, but somehow it felt right, more authentic and meaningful than the extravagant production Patricia had originally planned. The wedding that took place that afternoon bore little resemblance to the society event that had been months in the planning. Instead of 250 guests, we had about 80. People who genuinely cared about Michael and me, who had been part of our journey as a couple. The garden was transformed with simple, elegant touches. Mason jars filled with wildflowers hanging from shepherd's hooks along the aisle, gauzy fabric draped between trees, and hundreds of twinkling lights that would illuminate the space as evening fell. The weather cooperated beautifully with clear skies and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of jasmine from the hotel's gardens. My father walked me down the aisle, looking proud and emotional in his new suit. My mother watched from the front row, tears streaming down her face. Beside her sat James and Patricia, or Eleanor, as she had asked me to call her. Eleanor's expression was complex, a mixture of resignation, acceptance, and perhaps the beginnings of genuine happiness for her son. Michael waited for me under a simple wooden arch, his face lighting up as I approached. The look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know, that standing up for myself for us had been the right decision. That the man I was marrying was finally ready to be a true partner. Our vows were personal and heartfelt. Michael included a promise that brought tears to my eyes. I vow to always put our relationship first, to stand with you as an equal partner, and to build a family based on mutual respect and love. I knew those words were as much for his mother's ears as they were for mine. The reception that followed was joyful and relaxed. We moved to a smaller ballroom that had been quickly transformed with the same wildflower arrangements and string lights from the garden. The formal 7-course French menu was replaced with a selection of our favourite foods, everything from elegant miniature crab cakes to the deep dish pizza we had shared on our third date. Instead of the orchestra, we hired a last-minute local band that played an eclectic mix of music, including the bluegrass songs I had originally wanted. People actually danced, not the stiff, formal dancing Patricia had envisioned, but exuberant, joyful movement that filled the dance floor. Most surprisingly, Eleanor made visible efforts throughout the evening to connect with my family. I watched her engaged in what appeared to be a genuine conversation with my mother, both of them laughing at something my father had said. Later, I saw her introducing my aunt to some of her friends who had remained on the guest list, with none of the condescension I would have expected. When it came time for toasts, James spoke first, raising his glass with a warm smile. To Michael and Sarah, thank you for reminding us what a wedding should truly be, about love, family, and beginning a new chapter together. I couldn't be prouder of both of you today. Then, to everyone's surprise, Eleanor stood up. She looked around the room, taking in the simplified decorations, the mixed group of guests, the obvious happiness on display. I had a different speech prepared for, she began. One about Hamilton family traditions and the kind of society wedding I thought my son deserved. She paused, her voice becoming more genuine. But looking around this room tonight, I realized I was wrong about what makes a wedding special. It isn't the expense or the prestige of the venue or the social connections in attendance. It's the love that fills the room, and there is more love in this gathering than in any event I've ever organized. She turned to look directly at me. Sarah, I misjudged you, and I apologize for that. Welcome to our family, though I think it's clear that Michael and I are the ones fortunate to be welcomed into yours. As she raised her glass, I felt Michael squeeze my hand, his eyes shining with emotions I couldn't quite name. Relief, gratitude, and perhaps a new kind of respect for both his mother and me. The evening continued with more dancing laughter and genuine celebration. As Michael and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, my father pulled me aside for a quiet word. I'm proud of you, Pumpkin, he said, using my childhood nickname. Standing up for yourself like that took courage, and I think you may have gotten yourself a decent mother-in-law after all. I hugged him tightly. I love you, Dad. Thank you for supporting me through all of this. As Michael and I drove away from the hotel, rice and flower petals still caught in our hair, I reflected on how differently the day had turned out from what we had planned. The wedding we had wasn't the rustic vineyard celebration I had initially dreamed of, nor was it the society extravaganza Eleanor had tried to create. Instead, it was something uniquely ours, a true reflection of our relationship and the families we were bringing together. Most importantly, it had set the tone for our marriage, establishing that we would face challenges as a united front, that we would prioritize authenticity over appearances, and that we would create our own traditions rather than being bound by others' expectations. Michael reached over to take my hand as we drove. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For not giving up on us, for pushing me to be better, for giving my mother a chance to be better too. I smiled, lacing my fingers with his. That's what partnership is about, right? Bringing out the best in each other. He nodded, lifting my hand to kiss it. I think we're going to be very good at that. It's been a year since that tumultuous wedding day, and so much has changed. Michael and I bought a modest but beautiful home halfway between the city where he works and the school where I teach. It's not in the prestigious neighborhood Eleanor initially expected, but it's perfect for us. A craftsman bungalow with a garden I'm slowly filling with native plants, and a second bedroom we're converting into a nursery for the baby we're expecting in 4 months. The relationship with Eleanor has evolved in ways I never could have anticipated. After the wedding, I expected a return to her controlling ways, perhaps more subtle but still present. Instead, she seems to have genuinely taken the lessons of that day to heart. She still occasionally makes suggestions about how we should decorate our home or which social events we should attend, but she now prefers them as questions rather than directives, and she's learning to accept when we decline. More surprisingly, she and my mother have developed an unlikely friendship. It began with Eleanor inviting my parents to a small dinner party where she made a point of introducing my father to a client looking for custom furniture. That connection has led to several commissions for my dad's woodworking business. Meanwhile, my mum introduced Eleanor to her book club, which Eleanor joined despite it being far less prestigious than her usual social circles. They meet for lunch regularly now, and I sometimes catch them sharing private jokes. Michael has continued to grow in his ability to set boundaries, not just with his mother, but in all aspects of his life. He turned down a prestigious project that would have required extensive travel during my pregnancy, choosing instead to focus on local work that allows him to be more present at home. He stands his ground in professional situations where previously he might have acquiesced to keep the peace. And he regularly tells me how grateful he is that I pushed him to be more assertive that day. You saved us, he said recently as we assembled the crib for our baby's room. If we had gone through with that wedding the way my mother planned it, we would have set a precedent for our entire marriage. I smiled, remembering the chaos and redemption of that day. I think we saved each other, and maybe your mother too. James has become a wonderfully supportive father-in-law, offering advice when asked, but respecting our independence. He confided in me recently that he regrets not standing up to Eleanor more throughout their marriage. I enabled her worst tendencies, he admitted. Watching you refuse to do the same was a wake-up call for both of us. As for me, I've carried the strength I found that day into other aspects of my life. I advocated successfully for a new reading program at my school, something I might once have been too intimidated to pursue. I've become more comfortable asserting my needs and preferences, recognizing that doing so doesn't make me difficult or demanding. It makes me an equal partner in my relationships. The journey hasn't always been smooth. There have been moments when old patterns threatened to resurface, like when Eleanor initially insisted on planning an extravagant baby shower, until Michael and I gently but firmly explained that we wanted something smaller and more personal. But each time we navigate these situations successfully, our new family dynamic grows stronger. Looking back on that confrontation at the Grand Hamilton Hotel, I realize that what seemed like a potential disaster was actually the best possible foundation for our marriage. By standing up for myself and my family, I didn't just save our wedding day. I established the terms of our life together, and by rising to the occasion, Michael showed me that he was truly the partner I needed him to be. Sometimes the most loving decision is the most difficult one. Sometimes you have to be willing to risk everything to create something genuine and lasting. And sometimes the family you build is stronger precisely because you had to fight for it. Have you ever had to stand up to controlling in-laws or family members? To protect your relationship, how did you handle it, and how did it change your dynamic going forward? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries even with family. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to create authentic relationships in your own life, whatever that might look like.